Hey, welcome on in. It's your boy KV coming at you from my Soul Renegade Sound Studios right here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm welcoming you to the Ken Valdez Approach. You know, when I was a little boy, I remember hearing music throughout the house, whether it be Roy Orbison or Ricky Nelson or, Sam Cooke. Those voices changed me. I knew that music was something very important to me. A little bit later on, I caught Jeff Healey on TV. Maybe I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan at El Macombo or, Eddie Van Halen, Metallica, Stripe, or Journey, Ann and Nancy Wilson. I mean, Prince, right? And I knew that music had this big time hold on me, man. I knew that it was so important to me. And then in 1992, I went with a friend of mine to a concert. And it was one of the first real deal concerts that I had ever been to. But we sat right in front of this guitar player. And he blew my mind along with the 7 or 8 guys that were on stage with him that night. They put on a hell of a show. The band was Chicago, and the guitar player was Dawayne Bailey. They changed my life that night. I knew right then and there that music was going to be my career. That was going to be my path. I wanted to do it like that, man. It was incredible. Well, Dwayne and I met a couple of years later, and we get into that story as well. But without him, I wouldn't be where I'm at all. It's really incredible to think about. Dwayne is an exceptional singer, songwriter, guitar player. Man, he's worked with Chicago. He's also been a part of Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. I mean, God, when you think about it, iconic American bands of the last 50 years, you can't help but mention Bob Seger or Chicago, right? He's worked with Pat Boone. He's worked with Stu Hamm and so many others. It was incredible to talk to him. This conversation lasted 3 hours, so it was really hard to pare everything down into this particular episode. So I really hope you enjoy it because we're going to go into a bit of a rabbit hole and a deep dive. We're going to go here, there, and everywhere. But, man, his stories are amazing. This is my conversation with the one and only Dawayne Bailey. Check it out right here on The Approach. All right. I am here with the one, the only Dawayne Bailey. Man, and before we go into this, dude, it's so surreal talking to you, man, because, I know I've told you this, but let me express it to you again and let this audience hear. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it was not for this man. Let me explain just a little bit, man. I mean, I was going into my freshman year of high school, and Chicago, the band Chicago, was playing in Santa Fe, New Mexico at my favorite venue of all time. It was the Paulo Soleri. And I had tickets. I was there with my buddy Bjorn Hamry, man. I'll never forget this. And we're sitting on stage left, pretty much directly in front of you. And I had never been to a concert like that before. So it was just a surreal experience of just massive music and incredible talent. And then there's this guitar player who just blew my mind. Like, it was that moment where I'm like, yeah, man, this is what I want. And that guitar player was you. You changed my life, man. That's changed amazing. My life. So
I tell you, Kenny, we only played that venue one time, but I played, a million gigs in my very long life, and all around the world. And some venues you never forget. I remember the venue more than I remember the performance, because, after a while, when you play in a band, especially like Chicago, it's a very set that you play every night. And after you play, thousands of them night after night, just like the bus ride after the gig, many of those bus rides, become, you can't remember one from the other. But venues always stand out. I don't know. It's just something about every time when you're out west, I grew up in Kansas on farms, And the contrast of where you grew up in New Mexico, especially Santa Fe, it's very special to me, man. It's like when I get to New York City, that's special. When you get to Santa Fe, that's very special. And same with, you know, a lot of other places compared to a million other places that I play. But anyway, like I said, I will babble your face off. So
Oh man.
you got to keep the reins on me.
Oh, you're all right, my friend. And I mean, so we started at that show, right? And then, oh gosh, I must have been a sophomore, right? The next time that Chicago came into town, and I
Uh-huh.
went to go see you with my friend Stacy at a venue in Albuquerque,
Oh,
and
okay.
here was the crazy thing, right? She and I just happened to see you wandering around after the show, and I just said, we started talking, and you brought us backstage, man. And I mean, I'm still, all of 14 years old or something like that, 15 years old, and my dad is waiting for us out in the parking lot, and he's like wondering where are they? Hanging with the band, So
Was
yeah,
Albuquerque, so Albuquerque came after we played Santa Fe?
correct, correct.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and so again, man, that was another one of those instances where, just life changing,
Were they
absolutely
close?
life
Were
changing.
those two gigs close together?
Uh, Time wise, no. So that would have been another 2 or 3 years
Like
after I saw you in
what year
Santa
did
Fe.
we play Santa Fe and what year did we play Albuquerque?
Oh gosh. So let me think about this for a second, because I still have the ticket stub from Albuquerque, which I'd had to go find.
Santa
Um,
Fe, to me, just going on my gut memory, seemed like it was like early 90s.
yes, you're exactly right. I want to say that it was 92,
Yeah, I was going to say
93.
because after we played, after Triss came in 1990, uh, there was, you know, I love Danny Seraphin, uh, but when I played with Danny for 4 years, from '86 to 1990, early 1990, and then he was gone, and then they brought Triss in, and when Triss came in, there was I was still so new in the band when I came in '86 that I didn't know any of the drama or the baggage that they were all had in between each other, personal baggage or just the overall vibe. I didn't know any of it. I came in totally new in '86, in summer of '86, and uh, of course, by the end of Danny's time, I was very well aware of the drama and the baggage, and it wasn't there for the first few years with Danny, but definitely was before he was let go. And so when Triss was in the band, the way my memory head brain works is I recall certain, gigs kind of based on with during Danny time or Triss time. And when we played Santa Fe, that's why I kind of remember it being early '90s because it was Triss time,
Yes.
and there was no weird vibes. With it was like a party all the time, and there was none of that kind of uncomfortable, weird, crazy vibe and energy going on. So that's how I that's how my brain works. That's how I remember out of thousands of gigs how some gigs will stand out just from sheer were the vibes good? Did the band sound great? And I remember when we got to Santa Fe, we were so tight, and Triss had already been in the band, and so that's how I remember Santa Fe being in the early '90s because it was right after we had hired Triss.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I mean that show at the Palo Solari, probably the greatest concert I've ever seen in my life.
that's another thing that stands out about that Santa Fe gig is I thought we are incredibly close to the audience.
Yes. Dude, I mean, I was right there in front of you, man.
Yeah,
I was, and at this point in time, I had no idea about gear. I had no idea about anything. All I knew was that there's this guy who's rocking out on a guitar, and I'm like, absolutely life changing. The trajectory of my life, the decisions I made, all happened because of that show.
that's
Because
amazing,
of
man.
the guitar player that was right in front of me, man.
I
So,
tell you, man, it affected me that way. I connect with Santa Fe so much, and I just remember that gig. It just stood out, and it has always stood out in my memory because I just thought I want to play here all the time. You know, I love this venue. I love being this close to the crowd. I want to go jump in their lap. You know, and sometimes I didn't jump in their lap, but sometimes I would take my guitar off and hand it to people and at certain venues and just set it in their lap just to go here, feel what I'm feeling, the electricity of what I'm feeling,
right.
and,
So,
and I got in trouble for doing that sometimes.
well, no, I'll tell you what, man. If I remember correctly, right? Well, I mean, first and foremost, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Santa Fe, in particular, has such a deep, there's history for sure, but there's
It's
also a
unforgettable,
very deep, spiritual vibe there. But
very.
but going back to the fact that you wanted to jump into the crowd, or you'd take off your guitar and let the crowd feel the guitar. I remember this story that you had told us at the show in Albuquerque. So this was again like probably 2-3 years later,
Uh huh.
and you and I had and Stacy were backstage and we were talking, and you had brought up the fact that the night before, I want to say you may have been in Arizona, but the night before you did that where you took the guitar off and you put it out to the crowd to let them feel it, but somebody took it from you.
That that's a hell of a story in itself, man. It's a horrible story, and I got my ass in big, huge trouble. That was in their friggin' hometown of Chicago, man.
Oh man. Oy.
And their manager Howard Kaufman was there that night, and he read me the riot act because they could get sued for that stuff. It caused a huge brawl, and every time they play their hometown, it's insane. They have their families come, all their best friends come, and we were at the encore, and we were taking a bow, and I had my guitar with me, and I think I didn't watch it carefully because the guitar, we were all very close to the lip of the stage, and someone grabbed it.
Oh
That
man.
was one of those few nights where I did not just hand. I mean, you would have been insane, out of your mind, to hand a guitar to that crowd. They were out of their mind,
Oh man.
and that happened because someone grabbed it. They took it, and it started a huge brawl. My guitar tech, Hank Steiger, had to go out and retrieve it, so it wouldn't be taken home. And but it was it put him in the middle of that whole scene,
Oh
and a
wow.
woman who was under a human mountain of people was injured, and it was
Oof.
minor injuries, but I had to go backstage. Our manager came and got me and told me, I needed to go apologize to her, and I did. And I walked up to her, and I, on my knees, apologized profusely, and I told her I would pay any medical bills, anything. It was a very intense, serious, horrible night in
Wow.
their hometown. I mean, you want to talk about being humiliated and embarrassed? I was I just wanted to go hide under a rock. I think that was in '94, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right, man.
That was my last year with him, and it may have had a lot to do with it being my last year with him.
Oh
That
wow.
that one night, because I think they already had a lot of beefs with me from the clothes I wore, and the whole thing with Stone of Sisyphus being unreleased, and then doing the big band album, and we were already on the outs by that time anyway, and I'm sure they were already getting ready to replace me. But that night did not help matters. In fact, that night, I'm sure, kickstarted the whole process of them saying, this guy's out of here.
Oh,
And I don't
wow.
blame them, because I did a lot of crazy stuff. You get caught up in the machine. You spend a decade with a band like that, and things go wrong. The chemistry, the honeymoon is over after a few years. They got rid of Danny Seraphin in the middle of my time, my decade there. So I the decade I spent there, I already saw them get rid of an original band member, the very guy, one of the three guys that started the band with Walt
Right.
and Terry Kath. So I saw firsthand that no one is sacred, that if you get on their bad side, you're out of there. And so after that night in Chicago, I could tell, it's like, my days are numbered.
Unbelievable, man. So you we're obviously talking about, your time with Chicago, but you also spent a lot of time with Bob Seger, right?
I did. 1983 to the beginning of 86 was when, I only did one tour with him, but it was a long tour. It wasn't 12 months long. It was half a year, but it was intense, and it was every show was sold out. Chicago, I can't really say that every show we ever did was sold out, but Bob, was just a different level, and it was the first time I'd ever played in an arena with a national international act like that. Most of my life was spent playing in dives, bars, clubs.
Well, I find it fascinating because here you are with Bob Seger and
Hmm.
then with Chicago, and these are two of the most, I mean, just probably greatest American bands,
Yeah.
artists ever, and you're smack dab in the middle of both of them.
Yeah, and how funny, Detroit and Chicago are pretty close together, you know? And also both cities are uh, humongous, legendary music towns, Motown and Chicago blues and Chicago symphony, and so many great bands from Chicago, Styx and Cheap Trick and the Buckinghams and all these bands, and then Detroit. God, you could spend the rest of your life just listing everyone from
Yeah.
from
Oh,
Detroit
oh yeah.
and Motown. There's the white rock world of Ted Nugent and Bob Seger, and then you had Motown, and both of those were just incredible legacy from the same city, Detroit. Just amazing. So that I've always thought that. I always thought it was really interesting and ironic that I ended up with two bands so close together in time, because I found out in early 86 that I was no longer with Bob, which was news to me.
Oh wow.
And then just a few months later, I got the call to join Chicago.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. And just again, just classic, I mean, iconic American groups, right?
Yeah,
That obviously have legions of fans all over the world. But when you look at true American bands, right?
yeah, they're
I
classics.
Yeah, I can't help but think of Bob Seger, and I can't help but think of Chicago. And here you are, right in the middle of them both, man. And I think that is just, I mean, how cool is that? I mean,
I grew up when the first CTA album came out. I gravitated to Terry Kath immediately.
oh yeah,
But before CTA's album came out in April '69, some way I had gotten a hold of Bob Seger's "Ramblin' Gamblin' Man" album, and the album cover was also fun when you're just a 13-year-old kid, and the girls on the cover, and her hands on her chest and the other hand's on her crotch,
Right.
which was the Bob Seger album cover for that album. But it had nothing to do with the cover. It was not a Playboy thing. It was the music and his voice and his attitude, and it just blew me away, man. I played along with that record, hundreds of times, and I just loved the organ. I loved his voice. At that same time that I was listening to Ramblin' Gambling Man, I was a gigantic, huge freak out of my mind for Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels.
Wow.
And their guitar player, Jimmy, who went on to form the band Cactus with Tim Bogart. I finally got to meet Mitch Ryder after a Bob Seger concert, and it was like, I got to meet Roy Orbison in Nashville on
God, that's the wow. See,
Bob Seger tour in Nashville.
Wow, and that's
meeting the guy that did Pretty Woman and Mitch Ryder, who did all those Devil with a Blue Dress On and Sock It to Me and all those tunes. Just it flipped my wig, man.
Yeah, man. So let me ask you, man. So your influences, Terry Kath, obviously. I hear a ton of Zappa in your playing. I also hear, Hendrix in there as well. Am I right, or am I on the right track? Yeah.
Well, man. Because so many. I'm really not unique in when it comes to those influences, because we were all, everybody in my age group and many people that came after, many young people today are very influenced by Hendrix and Terry Kath, and just as much as we were when it was happening in real time. I remember when I discovered through Zappa, I discovered people like Varese and Stravinsky and all these modern avant-garde kind of classical people. You kind of take pride in going, oh yeah, man, I'm totally hip to music that's 100 years old, and I'm one of the first on my block to be that smart.
Like the original hipster.
Yeah. And so it's cool to be young today. All these classic guys are who the really young guys today still follow, just like we followed them when they were in their prime, when they were alive.
Unbelievable, man.
When it was all happening in real time. So yeah, Terry Kath and I mean Hendrix long before that, because Hendrix was 67, which was the year that CTA just started as a band.
Right.
And but Terry Kath and Kerry Livgren was a huge influence on me, because I grew up with the guy, and right there watching him evolve from when he was a teenager. Most people didn't know who Kerry Livgren was until the mid 70s. Well, I was following him in 1969, and he had a really similar. There were three guys that I really followed and really styled a lot of my playing after from that time, other than Hendrix and Eric Clapton, Cream era. Sure. Clapton and Hendrix and Jeff Beck for me were the three main ones at first in the early years, because there was no Terry Kath at that time.
Right. And I mean, and I hear Beck all over your playing too.
Oh, so. Man. Yeah. Like Beckola album. I mean, that hit me, and 69 is when I first heard Beckola. It's when it first came out with CTA and King Crimson and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It was just an amazing year for music. Mountain, Leslie West and Mountain. Oh yeah. Man. Leslie West, his voice and his guitar playing hit me just as hard as Clapton and Hendrix. I went and saw Mountain. I drove from my hometown of Manhattan to Wichita to see Black Sabbath on their very first U.S. tour, open for Mountain.
Oh, wow.
And I had all their albums too, or I had their first albums. I had the first Black Sabbath album, and I listened to it religiously. Same with the first Mountain album. Leslie West's tone, his
Yeah, man.
amazing aggressive singing voice. He was this huge mountain of a guy, and that all that was happening at the same time. And the first Zeppelin album in '69, and I was floored by all of it. And I love Jimmy Page. Jimmy wasn't really the soloist that Jeff Beck was, and but it's funny how it all came from the Yardbirds and John Mayall. Because all those guys had been in Mayall's band before they formed. Like Peter Green.
Yes.
Yes. Peter Green was the guy. And then he left Mayall to form Fleetwood. To form
Fleetwood
Peter
Mac.
Green's Fleetwood Mac was
Right.
what they were called. And then Clapton left Mayall, and Jack Bruce, I think, was with John Mayall. So Mayall, was the breeding ground for so many of those bands, the Animals, and John McVie is there with Mayall and Clapton on the cover of that album. And Hideaway's on that album.
Right.
The cover of was it Albert King or
Freddie King?
Freddie King, yeah. And that was all before Cream even started.
God, I mean, what a time for music too.
I know, man.
Right?
And so many of us were hit in the head with a brick from all that stuff. So it wasn't just me, it's like I was just one of millions that were taking our cues from these guys. And these guys were kids too. They were like early to mid 20s. And they were so developed and they stood out of the pack, and
Right.
and they just, man, the British guys took American blues and just ran with it, and they turned around and fed it back to us.
Right.
They fed on what we fed them, and then they fed it back to us. It was kind of like a mother bird regurgitating in its baby's mouth.
Exactly.
and we ate that little worm all up.
Yeah, we did. Yes, we did, man.
And then, of course, Hendrix. But it's funny that Hendrix was kind of considered a British guy when he moved there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So he kind of had one foot in America and one foot over there. But
he really was, man. He really was the perfect storm when you look at it that way too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The American side, the British side,
and he when he went there, he taught them a lesson. He gave them a big ass whooping. You hear all the stories about how Pete Townsend and Clapton and Jeff Beck all went, well, I guess I'm selling real estate now.
Right.
They've all had those comments in the press where they say, man, when Jimmy came over here, it was like, what? I didn't, you didn't tell me he was going to be this good.
Right.
Man, can you imagine? Can you imagine those guys? They were on top of the world, man.
Oh.
They were multimillionaires and they were rock stars, and not really pop stars, but man, the Who, and they were all badass in their own way.
Yes, they were.
The Who were totally badass, and Pete Townsend, he had no rival,
No.
and Clapton and Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. My God, these guys were huge already. And then Hendrix walks in and goes, you might want to sit down.
But then on top of that, I think the thing that sticks out to me even more, at the end of it, he was just so, he was shy, yes, but he was also very humble.
Always, man.
And that stood out to me. It's like,
yeah,
I loved that about him.
It's just such a big part of who Jimmy was his shyness and his humbleness. There was so much keeping him down. Plus, he was black.
Right.
He was also half Cherokee. So he was already a guy in society that was beaten down. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
When you're playing down south and you can't go to a water fountain that says, whites only, You know, you're not going to grow up real cocky around stuff like that. So I think a lot of those things are what gave him his humbleness already. You know, his modesty and his humility was just being thankful that he didn't get murdered that night. There was nobody like that guy when he came out. You just went, where the hell did this guy come from?
Right, man. Right, exactly. Dude, so I'm going to ask you this here because I like we'll go in a little bit of a different direction, but going back to you, right?
I
um,
know I can go hours talking about
dude,
Jimmy and Terry and all our heroes.
man, I can too, but it's so awesome to hear it coming from you because again, it's like these are your influences and they're my influences and they're
Yeah,
still so relevant and so
we're all
important.
kids of those people, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So with you though, let me ask you this because I mean you were obviously a fan of Terry,
Hmm.
right? And
Oh yeah,
here you are in Chicago, and you know this back catalog of theirs, and Terry's just mastery, you know that savant, that genius side of him. But then you got like the latter Chicago with the David Fosters and the
yeah,
the kind of syrupy kind of stuff, if you will, if you will. Um,
absolutely.
how did you approach playing the real power ballady type stuff as opposed to the real rock and stuff that Terry was kind of synonymous with?
When Chicago called me, I was so deep into my own band uh, that I had started when I was with Bob Seger. When the 2 years that I was still with Bob, but we didn't play, but we were in the studio um, and we recorded the Like a Rock album. We rehearsed it, and so in the meantime, I had enough time on my hands that I had left LA and moved back to Kansas, to Wichita, and I had the Bob Seger thing still going, and Bob was flying me to Detroit to record, and then when he finally did the actual album, he did it at Criteria in Miami. So I was flying, Detroit, Miami. I was also working as a staff writer for Michael O'Connor Music out of in Studio City, and he was flying me to New York to write with Leslie Pearl, one of his staff writers. And so I had formed my own band called Private Parts. And at the very end of Private Parts, I had just hired Martina Mcbride as she was like the local amazing chick singer
Wow.
singing rock and roll at that time. She had played in her dad's and her father Daryl's country band. But when I met her, she was around 19 and she was trying to be a rock singer, Pat Benatar, and it was 1985, 86. And so she was in her late teens and wanting to be a rock singer before she went full blown country. And so I had just hired her uh, in just a couple weeks before Chicago called me. Um, and what I'm trying to get at, because I ramble and babble like a mofo, I don't drink coffee. Thank God I don't drink coffee because I don't do caffeine. Otherwise, really be yapping my ass off. But so I don't need caffeine. I am caffeine. Uh, um,
I
so
love it.
anyway, Private Parts. My whole agenda with Private Parts was minimalism. The police, how the police taught us about being minimal. A trio, how a trio could be cool again, like
Right.
Hendrix experience. Drums, bass, guitar. Very simple, a lot of space. Sting and Andy Summers, amazing playing. It just floored me. It hit me like the Beatles, like Hendrix, like all the greats hit me. The Police hit me like that. And so my band Private Parts was very, very policey. And Andy Summers didn't do a lot of shredding in the
No,
Police.
no, it
It
didn't.
was all textural, chordal chorus, stereo chorus, and that I just jumped on that train, man. I was so attracted to it. You know, Sting and I share a birthday just by a few hours.
Oh wow.
Um, just like I share a birthday with Stevie Ray Vaughan, although Stevie and I were born on the same day, month, and year. We were born on the exact same day. But I relate when I meet. I can meet people and almost tell they're a Libra. You know, that kind of thing. There's something to astrology. I don't live by it, but I pay attention to it because I think there's a lot to it. I think there's a lot of traits in astrological signs that are similar. That there's something to it. There's a theme to it.
I agree. I'm a Libra as well, man. So I feel you.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
God,
man.
what
Yep.
day is your birthday?
October 10th.
10th.
Yeah.
We're only a week apart.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I think that's why that's another reason I've always felt a kinship with you and a brotherhood with you because there's just something underlying about it that draws you. You know, and it's funny because I've never really been drawn to Libra women on a romantic thing because
Uh-huh.
we kind of repel. But but Libra musicians, male or female, I'm always drawn to because there's always a similar thing going on.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
Lindsey Buckingham. We're also Robert Lamb. I was drawn to him as a kid, and I was drawn to him when I was in the band working with him side by side all the time. I just felt so comfortable in his space and the way he thought and the way he wrote lyrics and his musical ideas and his songs were always my favorite to play. And even though, Panko, who is a Leo, I feel comfortable playing his stuff too, because all those amazing horn charts.
Right.
So I try not to put too much emphasis on the astrological thing, but anyway,
But
whatever.
sometimes it makes sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Donnie Dacus is a Libra too.
Oh man.
He's October 12th. Lamb is October 13th. Paul Simon is October 13th. Sammy Hagar is October 13th.
David Lee Roth is October 10th.
Huh?
David Lee Roth is October 10th.
There you go.
So there's my
But you know what? Dave's a Libra, and not all Libras can be introverted. You know, one of us has to go out there and be the front man.
Right.
And David
he did it quite well.
He did
Dave did a good job.
He did it like a true. I mean, he may not show a lot of Libra tendencies, but man, he was just. I love him.
Yeah.
I love his voice. I love his attitude. And he got a little creepy, and he says a lot of outrageous stuff. But you share a birthday with a great legend, man. I love David Lee Roth. I really do. Because come on, man, David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen. Come on.
Right. Well, you want to get even like crazier, 6 degrees of separation. Just like, it's insane. I saw Van Halen. Oh, this must have been 2012. I want to say it was when Wolfie was in the band and David Lee Roth was singing, and I had never seen Van Halen up to that point. But guess who got me tickets and passes for that show? But Jason Scheff.
Where was the gig at?
This was in St. Paul, man. Yeah. So Jason I met up with Jason in St. Paul. He brought his sons out to go catch the Van Halen show. And,
really?
Yeah, and he got me tickets and passes, man. And it was a riot. It was.
Oh, were they playing?
Yeah.
Were Chicago playing there or something?
No. He flew out just to catch the show with his kids, man.
Jason's always going to Minneapolis, St. Paul to work with Paul Peterson.
Yes. And Paul is like a big brother to me, man. He's
absolutely.
Yeah, he's a mentor. He's one of my best friends.
Oh my God. We could talk about the Peterson family for the next 2,000 hours.
Yeah, I mean, Ricky has been on several.
Oh,
Ricky's been on several of my records. Billy, when I first moved out here, he was originally supposed to be playing bass for me.
oh, really?
Yeah, man, yeah.
Because he was with Steve Miller for a long time.
He was
right?
with Steve Miller for about 27 years or something like
That's
that.
a long time.
Yeah, man. And then there's Ricky, obviously, and there's Paul. And I met Paul, the latest, right? But he and I just I don't know, man. There's a connection. He's another Libra, and
Paul is. Does not surprise me.
Yeah, man. And he and I we started writing for the Soul Renegade record, and just I am self-taught.
Yeah.
I am self-taught, and I never had real, musical instruction. But man, if there's anybody that has schooled me in music, in working in a studio, in, just as a musician, it's Paul. Paul has kicked my ass on so many different occasions, man.
I believe it. I believe it. I mean, the whole family they're.
Yeah.
What can you say, man? The whole collective is it's just one big genius.
Yes.
Genetic pool of, and in their case, their family's so big, it's not a pool, it's an ocean,
Yeah, man. Yeah. And I mean,
just amazing. Their mom and all their cousins and
yes. Yeah. Oh my God.
I can't keep track of it,
Yeah.
They've got their roots so deep into that Minneapolis, St. Paul area of family and church and gospel and Prince and Paisley Park and all of it.
All of it.
The family and
talk about a record that changed my life.
Oh man.
That was my favorite Prince offshoot by far. And
yeah.
That record was just the second I heard Mutiny, it was over. It was like
St.
okay.
Paul.
Yeah, man.
St. Paul.
Yeah. That was it, man. Dude. Yeah. So I mean, it's so funny because here we are chatting, and it's like, I mean, the parallels that you and I have are just it's ridiculous,
It's a small world, man.
It really is. So while you're talking, I was asking about how did you combine, like, I mean, you came into Chicago, right? And they started having a lot of the FM, AM, FM hits.
The power ballads.
Yeah, the more power ballady, David Foster-y type stuff.
Not Terry Kath at all.
Right. So how did you, I mean,
well,
how did you go into that, man? How did you go into that? That's why I brought in
Private Parts, because that's why I was talking about that whole thing. Because with Private Parts and the Police and that whole minimalist approach, I want a band and I want to write songs, and I love the whole approach of the Police. I love their philosophy of minimalism, and that a lot of what they've always said that they learned a lot of that from Miles Davis and the way that he had his bebop period with Charlie Parker and Coltrane, where they were just flying sheets of notes, just flying solos. And then Miles went very minimal, and his cool period and where a lot of space. And I love that idea because it's something I never tried before. Because up to that point, it was like solo, your face off, solo, lots of notes. And the idea of space and holding back and making space matter and count and using space just as much of a tool as using a lot of notes.
Yes.
And so that's where my head was at. I was very I was very aware of Chicago re-emerging on the scene. I knew that how 14, like late 70, after Terry died, I was very aware. I always stayed very aware of them. I always followed their career, even if I didn't listen to it or buy the albums. I always paid attention. I remember exactly where I was the day Terry died, and I got the news I heard the radio like everybody else, but even though I wasn't buying the albums like I did when I was a kid, still followed their career, and especially after Terry died and then Donnie left. And after Donnie left, I had no idea what the hell was going on with Chicago. I didn't know who replaced Dacus. But I was always a big Champlin fan,
Oh
and
yeah.
always followed the Suns.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And then I
Mean,
saw
man.
that
Oof.
he had came in, and I had, we all my buddies in my bands in the late '70s in Kansas, we'd get off the gig and go listen to Bobby Caldwell's new album, "What You Won't Do for Love."
Right.
Follow that with "I Am" album by Earth, Wind and Fire, "In the Stone," like a mofo,
Yeah, man.
which was all David Foster and Bill Champlin and Jay Graydon and Maurice White, and then we'd listen to Sons of Champlin or Champlin's solo album at that time, "Runaway" and all that stuff,
Right.
and which was all also Foster-ish. Foster was involved with all that stuff, and so I was slowly evolving in my consciousness and in their world. And I had known that Jason got the gig in '85 because John Keane, the drummer I was playing with Jason in a band in '84 after the Bob Seger tour, John Keane called me and told me that Jason had gotten the Chicago gig. And I went, "Really? Wow. Wow. Lead singer for Chicago."
Man.
Because
Yeah.
we went from playing in a bar band in Studio City, and like I said, at that time I was still with Bob Seger, so I was really happy for him. And then a few months later, he called and tried to convince me to fly to LA, back to LA, because I had just moved from LA to Wichita and put Private Parts together. That
Right.
band was only together for about a year and a half. And you know better than anybody what it's like to build up your following, your fan base.
Indeed. Indeed. I'm still trying to do it.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard work, and you don't take it for granted, and you also cherish it and value it, and it's everything. I love Jason, and I was so honored that he called, and I had just been with Bob Seger not too long before that, and then I had my own band, so I just was not in the headspace to all of a sudden get a phone call from a good buddy like Jason and go, "Dude, walk away from your life and come out here and be in my world." And I
Right.
just thought, no, you know, I just, and so I told him no. I turned him down, and I had so many reasons. Plus, my two kids were still really young and were there in Wichita with me. And there was so many reasons why I didn't want to take the gig and move away and break up my band, piss off the investors and piss off the band. And, you know, I mean, the list of enemies I made instantly when I decided to join Chicago. You would not believe the people I pissed off when I took that gig that I was trying to avoid by not taking the gig.
Right. Right.
Um, so Jason, I said no, and then he goes, sleep on it for a week, and I'll call you back. And I knew what I was going to say the next time he called, and sure enough, he did. Because I thought maybe they'll just find another guitar player, and I won't even have to deal with turning him down again. But he called back and offered it to me again, and this time, Jason's a very convincing guy.
Yeah, he is.
He he can talk you into anything. He's just a sweetheart. And plus, I just loved the guy to death. And he really convinced me. He played me the tunes over the phone, the new 18 album, and it just sounded so good. And here I was struggling with my own band, making no money, and he just said, "Dude, I'm sending you a plane ticket. Do it."
Oh wow.
And And so I just said, you know what? I'll come out. I'll fly out. So I did. And when Jason is very convincing, well, so is Pankow and Lamb and Seraphin and Champlin, and I mean, God, come on, just
Right.
Champlin alone.
Right, man. Right.
You're in the room with Champlin, and you're going to be able to walk out and go, "No, I don't want to play with you." you know, you hear the Chicago horn section, you go, "No, I don't want to play with you guys." At 20 minutes of playing with those guys, with Champlin, the Chicago horns, looking over at Robert freaking Lamb,
Right, man. Right.
and you go, how do I turn this down?
Yeah.
And then plus there's Jason. I was in love with the guy from day one when I met him with the Gerard audition in '82.
Right.
When we played together for half a year in '84, I was like everybody else. He was very popular. Everybody loved Jason. Plus he's just a badass bass player.
Yeah,
God,
he
I
is,
love
man. That
playing with
guy's
that
insane.
guy. His vocals, we both have a high tenor range, and we blended together so well. And plus his bass playing was just so greasy. It was like getting addicted to KFC, man. I got
awesome.
addicted to Jason. Jason's bass playing was so greasy and so soul food and so funky, and I never forgot it. And I loved playing with him. So when he's calling me, and then you get out to Danny Seraphin's garage, and you're standing there playing with Jace, with your old buddy Jason. All the, your heroes are right there. There's the whole band of Chicago, and then you got Bill freaking Champlin.
Right, man. Right.
So, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, dude, you're gonna take the gig.
Yeah, it's the classic Chicago mob saying, they made you a deal you couldn't refuse.
Right.
And so I was there, and then Lamb came up to me after and said, "You have the gig if you want it. And how much do you want to make?" And I told him, and he said, "Okay." And so all those stars aligned.
Oh, man.
And I just could not say no. So I had to go back to Kansas and face everybody and go, guess what? And guess what? I'm going to piss in your post toasties right now.
Oh, man.
And from my children to my band to the manager and his partner to all our fans, which all 12 of them. But they were loyal.
Right, right.
And so the whole thing, it just sucked. And the thing we had built up for the last year and a half, it was just gone, because I had started it all and controlled it all. And then I just walk away from it all. That's horrible. That's really friggin' horrible. But I didn't just walk away because I was a drug addict or because
you
I was out
contributed
of
to
my
a legacy.
mind.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Chicago was big at that time. They've been big for a long, long time. And Inspiration was on the radio and all that stuff. Howard Habit. So your initial question, which I veered off of, got a total. I'm on another planet of topic, but what your original thing was about saying, how did I maneuver and how did I, the Kath thing with the new David Foster power ballad thing. I think it was just because I think Chicago themselves had already gotten away from, and you can't blame them. They had kind of tried to grow and get beyond the whole Kath thing because they had to. They had no other choice.
Right, right.
They had to get another guitar player if they were going to survive as a band.
God.
They ended up, after Kath died, or even before Kath died, right before he died, they had parted ways with Gercio.
Right.
So they were dealing with different producers, different guitar players, and just one of those elements is a huge change for them, let alone two.
Right.
New guitar player, no Kath, and a new producer, no Gercio. I mean,
Right.
my God,
Oh
Gercio
man.
and Kath, and no Gercio, no Kath in Chicago. How do you conceive of such a thing? But they had to do what they did, and by the early '80s, they were back on radio, making lots of money again and having big hits again. And so there was much less emphasis on the Kath material and the
Right.
Kath everything. And so when I came in summer of '86, there was not a collective Kath flag waving over my head at all times. I was not in a Kath headspace when it came to playing style and gear and the gear he was using.
Right.
My headspace was in the here and now at that time, which was Mike Landau and Tim Pierce and Dan Huff and Michael Thompson.
Right. And you
And
were also talking about creating, like, atmosphere and vibe.
yeah, I was very in Andy Summers and Police mode in my head, no power ballads. And so here I am in a band that built their reputation on guitar solos and power ballads.
Right.
The two
Right.
things that I was anti of in my band. And so it was kind of a nightmare. That's why I turned it all down at the beginning anyway.
God, but then
For
here you are, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you come into this and you bring in the atmosphere, you bring in the vibe, you bring in like that kind of Zappa thing, right? Like Terry Kath was Terry Kath. Like that, like he played like Terry Kath. He was an innovator. He was that guy.
hmm
What you did with that band was you brought it back to that in your own way. You know what I mean? Like you
well,
had
yeah,
it was
kind of an
bombastic
'80s.
in a good way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It,
in that kind of '80s kind of way of how much of the new Chicago sound that were those albums were made with Lukather and Landau and Paul Jackson Jr. and modern then current guitar sounds, Bob Bradshaw racks,
right.
stereo racks, a lot of chorus, which kind of fit in with my whole Andy Summers chorus
Sure. Sure.
state of mind. That whole state of mind, I dove into that state of mind, and I had never been in it before because I never had the money or the accessibility to a Bradshaw rack sitting in a band in Kansas.
Right.
Even before I moved back to Kansas, when I still lived in LA, I didn't have the money for a Bradshaw rack or you know a stack of 20 different digital rack effects of that I had knew nothing about because I'm an electronic caveman and a technical dweeb. And I remember when I went into the studio with Gerard McMahon in 1982, and Michael Austin, son of Mo Austin
Right.
of Warner Brothers fame, was the producer on that album. And they'd already used Landau on that album. And Landau came in with his Bradshaw rack and it sounded perfect. And he's the god that he always has been. And then Gerard brings me in, and Michael Austin walked in and he goes, "Who's this guy?" And Gerard went, "He's the new guitar player in my band." And he went, "Where's his Bradshaw rack?" And Gerard says he doesn't have it. He didn't have one yet. And he goes, "Just listen to him play, Michael." And then with Chicago, I finally had the budget, and I was surrounded by the experts that built those racks. I had access to Bob Bradshaw all of a sudden. So I had an instant in to
Dude.
Bob and all that technology and all the gear. I had the budget finally. Chicago loaned me about 12 grand, and
Oh my God.
took
Wow.
that I took that 12 grand and put it into my rack.
Wow.
And I just basically handed it to Bob Bradshaw and went,
here.
Make me pretty. Make me pretty, Bob. Terry Kath was just not a big part of that world at that time. Terry didn't use racks or
No.
stereo gear. He didn't play in stereo. He used that little night amp that cost what, $50 new in the 60s.
Right.
He did a lot with a little, you know, and his gear was always like that, very basic. He didn't have a lot of effects. You know, when all of a sudden you're being paid a lot of money to recreate what Landau and Lukather had just laid down on these big hit records, and Foster's the producer, and then they bring in Ron Nevison, and then I plugged in my Bradshaw rack, and I thought, I got it made. I got a Bradshaw rack, and I went out and I plugged it in, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Oh man, the learning curve must have been ridiculous.
It's one thing to get on stage with Chicago with a Bradshaw rack and fool a bunch of people out in the audience that you don't know what you're doing with a Bradshaw rack and effects. And it's a whole other ballgame when you get in a quiet, very expensive recording studio with a big producer who goes, okay, hit your first note. And he goes, that sucks. Get Mike Landau on the phone. So when we talk, my God, dude, we could talk for days.
Oh,
weeks.
hell yes. Absolutely. Dude,
So-
yes.
So I get off track a lot here.
No, man. I'm here I'm following you, man, and I'm just like, God, this is amazing. Who are you listening to these days? Who inspires you these days?
I listen to everything. Now that we have YouTube, and my musical tastes are all over the map and always have been. So now in 2022, I'm just always into all the new guitar players and like I was listening to Larry Basilio, the female guitar player.
Okay.
She's from Brazil, but she plays very Vi-like, and I think she's got Satriani as a guest on her last album.
Oh, wow.
And she used Vinny on drums and Lee Sklar on bass a little bit.
Yeah, that doesn't suck either.
And yeah, I mean, their band is just amazing. She's been around for a few years. She's just such a great guitar player. Another guy I listen to all the time that I learn a lot from is he goes by the name Chords of Orion.
Cool name.
But his actual name is Bill Vincil with a V, like Vi, but Vencil. Bill Vincil.
Awesome.
And Bill is totally into atmospheric, spacey kind of stereo effect, digital delay panning type stuff that I've been doing for a long time. That stuff I did with Chicago during my guitar solo break that I used to do. I had a song called Darren that was a tribute to my little brother.
Right.
And the kid that just won a Grammy,
Kingfish.
real big Chris,
Yep.
Chris.
Yeah. Kingfish is.
Yeah.
Incredible. I just played with him about a month ago.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah. He and I go back a little bit too, man. But yeah, he's.
You guys are the true, real deal of modern blues, rock, the vocals, the guitar solos. I mean, Johnny Lang.
Johnny was the reason why I moved out here. Johnny and his dad brought me out to Minnesota. So yeah.
Really?
Man, yeah, dude. Yeah.
Man, when I first discovered Johnny Lang, I was living in Paris in 1998. And I was living in Paris, France, and I discovered him, and I just went, what the fuck?
Yeah, man. Yeah. He's talk about a guy that's a real deal, man. I could tell you stories about John, man, and he's still a dear friend, and man, I mean, he's a very talented cat, man.
I saw him. I was at that time in Paris. I was living and playing and working with Véronique Sanson, And her son is, she was married to Steve Stills, so Chris Stills is her
Sure.
son,
Yeah.
and he was opening for Johnny in Paris one night, and we got to hang with that whole scene one night over there, and who the fuck is this kid?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
He's just one of those guys that, another one of many that are so young that get into the blues world, and they're just like kingfish, like you said. There's so many of these kids that, and I'm sure you were that way too.
Oh man, see, I was listening to you before I was listening to any of that, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's the truth, man. I was
I am
listening
one
to
of
you.
the masters of the blues world. Let's face it.
Love it. Just off the top of your head, man, I'm going to go with both of these bands. First one is going to be Seger. Top 3 favorite Seger songs that you got to play.
Main Street, which is a ballad.
Right?
Hollywood Nights.
Dude, that's probably my favorite Seger song, period. Yeah.
And Her Strut. And Her Strut, it's got to be Her Strut and Fire Down Below.
All right, and let me ask you this, man. Top 3 favorite Chicago tunes to play on.
Introduction. We Can Stop the Hurtin'. The Ballet.
Right.
From Chicago 22. Not the Color My World part, but I mean, sorry, Jimmy Pankow. I know that's your masterpiece. Walt loves it because there's a big flute solo on it.
Right.
And I love the composition of it, but playing it every night can get tedious. And because my ego is not stroked. It doesn't feature guitar, because with Chicago if you're a guitar player, you get your ego stroked all the time because there's a million solo songs to solo on.
Right.
But anyway, Color My World, it's just very slow, and I heard it at every high school prom. But anyway, Jimmy's Ballet is just a masterpiece, and it's also very Zappa-like.
Yes, it is.
West Virginia Fantasies is very Uncle Meat, Zappa inspired. It's directly inspired by Frank Zappa. A lot of Pankow's arranging and horn writing, I think, were very Zappa inspired.
I could totally hear that.
Totally. And then plus, it's really an involved, long piece of music, and it's complicated. It's got different time signatures. It's got "Make Me Smile" as part of the ballet, which is an insane song. And plus an incredible guitar solo that I still don't know how to play, because Terry Kath, right hand, is like a friggin' Paul Bunyan wood cutting machine.
God, he was so good, man.
I mean, that guy, he could have played Malaguena, and his right hand was like Flamingo City, man. He's a big dude. I'm a little weasel, dude. He was just a really strong guy. You can't fake that. And if you're a guitar player and your right hand, if your Terry Kath's right hand was so strong, I couldn't keep up with that.
Everybody, we're talking with Dawayne Bailey. Thank you, bro.
Thank you so much, Ken. It's a huge honor. I love you to death, and I love you to pieces.
Right back at you.
And I'm a huge fan. And what can I say? I will babble your face off, and you cannot shut me up.
I love it, dude. I love it. Things we have on the cutting room floor. It's incredible. This conversation went on for 3+ hours, and I could have listened to him for another 3+ easily. He's one of my favorite people. I want to thank my special guest this week, Mr. Dawayne Bailey. I wouldn't be having my career. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it weren't for that man. He's a tremendous talent. Gosh, the fact that he played with Seger and Chicago, 2 of the most iconic rock and roll bands of all time. Yeah, it's just mind-blowing. Just even Chicago alone, stepping into the shoes of Terry Kath, it's just an impossible feat in and of itself. but what he brought to that band was something very special. I urge you guys to go find him. Go look up some old Chicago YouTube clips. I believe there's one that's live from the Greek, and I think the other one is called And the Band Played On. But either way, he's on fire, man. He's also one of my favorite people and obviously a hell of a storyteller. Again, thank you so much to Dawayne Bailey for being on the show. I want to urge all of you guys to go check out my website, www.kenvaldez.com. Over there, you can find out about my music. You can also find out about this here show. And there's also links to my social media. Go find me, go friend me, go send me a message. I'd love to hear from all of you. If you dig this show and you want to show just a little bit of love, go to Venmo. My Venmo handle is @KenValdez. Man, I'll tell you what, it helps when I want to bring a guest like Dawayne in, or, just to keep this bus on the road, if you will. It takes a little bit of money, so with a little bit of help, we'll keep moving forward. Thank you very much. That's about it. Until next week, my friends. As always, be good to each other and take care of one another. Bye-bye.